want to share with you some activities from the books that I talked about earlier. The first one is the Grow and Shrink board, and you have the Grow and Shrink board. It comes in book 1, and it is the Black Line Master at the very back. And what I did with these when I was in the classroom, I didn't have a laminator, but I had lots of sheet protectors. So I made copies of, you can see what it looks like. It's just dots. I'm going to put one up here for us in just a minute. And I would put it in a sheet protector, and that way if I wanted to have the kids write on it, they could write on it and we'd draw it and mark it off. So, but the activity that I want us to look at is on page 35, if you want to look in your books, is the activity that we're going to look at. The Grow and Shrink board is you have a dice, and it's depending on what your kids need. If they're ready to use the symbols, then you can use the symbols. If they're not ready for the symbols, then you can use the dots, the dot dice. So I'm going to use the dot dice with this one, this activity. So what we're going to do is we're going to roll the dice, and I've rolled a 5. So, this is where I would have I'd be sitting with my kids. This is math intervention. It was a one-on-one, which is the situations that you all have with your kids or small group. So we would build 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I always made my kids verbalize, and I always made them, and see how that's working on that one-to-one correspondence as well. Right? Then we'd roll the dice again, and I got a 6. So we talked about, okay, now what are we going to have to do to make that 5 become a 6? And so they would get to where sometimes they would have to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. They'd have to count. And sometimes, whenever we got really good at it, they'd immediately put 1 on there. So I'd say, so after they'd done that, then I said, what'd you have to do? I had to add 1. I had to put 1 on. Then we roll the dice again, and we get a 1. Okay, so let's make this 6 become 1. Sometimes they would take them all off one at a time, and then sometimes when they get really good, they just sweep all that off. And I said, what'd you have to do? I had to take away, and then they would forget how many they took away, and then they'd have to count. But they took away 5. So lots of conversation with the kids. That's what's great about this activity. It's not necessarily that they're sitting there rolling the dice and building numbers. It's the conversation you have with the kids. It's making them talk about their thinking, what they actually did and why they did it. So that's the most important piece about that activity. Now, the next one I want to share with you is called the Creation Station. And the Creation Station is also in that book 1. And there is a Black Line Master, and it is on page 35 in the book, if you want to flip to the book, in book 1. And what I would do if I were you, is I would I'd run these on cardstock, because they're going to love them. They're going to beg you to let you play, to work with these. What's called play. I mean, that's all it is. The kids think it's play. So what you have to do with this can be used for so many different things. But in this case, what we want to do is we want to look at this dog, and we have to think about how many cubes would we need if we wanted to build that dog. And of course, the dog has to stand up, which really, really works with perception with the kids, with visual perception. So if I'm going to build this dog, and first of all, how many cubes am I going to need? So they're going to need to count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Some of them will have to touch and count, and that's fine. Some of them will be able to look and see. They'll say 6, and I'll say, well, how'd you see that so fast? And they'll say, well, there's 3 for the body, 2 for the legs, and 1 for the head. Okay? So just make them talk. Then of course, you're going to build it. Okay, so how we're going to build? Well, we're going to build, it has to stand up. So we're going to start with the legs. And I'm not sure how well that's going to show. So I'm going to lay it down so you'll see, but this would be standing up for the kids, and I'll show you in just a minute. And then of course, we're going to need 3 for the body. And then of course, 1 for the head. And sometimes they would put the head on like this. And I'd say, well, no, does that look exactly like this? And they would have to look and see, and then they flip it around. And they would build this. But what's neat about this is that the kids love it. And of course, ideally what we want them to do is build it and have it standing up like this. It's kind of hard for you to see. But you want them to stand up, pop up off the table, off their desk. All right. So once they built 1 dog, you can say, I wonder how many cubes we would need to build 2 dogs. And then there's all that conversation about, well, we'd need 6 more. Well, how much is 6 and 6? How many would that be for 2 dogs? So you're getting into that doubles and counting by 6s and all kinds of good math there using just this little picture. And there are tons of them in there, but the dog is my favorite one for us to do, to have participants do. Lots and lots of fun with these, and lots of learning, lots of conversation about math. Now the next 2 activities are actually in book 2. So book 2 on page 133. We're going to look at build a floor first. And then here's your cards to play on. Of course, I'm just going to use one of them, one side, but you can cut these up. So if we look at the directions for build a floor, it says the children roll number cubes, build the first pair of their floor using connecting cubes, and then complete the second according to what they roll on the number cubes. And then what I love about this too is there's different levels of difficulty. For level 1, it's just making combinations. You build a floor, you need the game board, and your number cube is 0 through 4 or 0 through 5 or 1 through 6, depending on where your kids are at. That's what's great about this, is you can make this fit your kids. You don't have to make your kids fit the game. You modify the game to fit them. And of course, level 2, you ramp it up 1 where you have them write the equations that they see, what they actually build. So we're actually going to build a little bit here. I'm not going to build the whole thing, but I want you to get an idea of what it would be. So I'm going to roll this dice. I'm just going to keep the number 1 out, and we can see that we've got a 5. So I'm going to put 5 cubes. And we're going to build a floor of 6. Sorry, I should have. And of course, you tell them what number they're going to work with. Floor 6. Then I rolled a 5. And roll again, and I got a 6 that time. So that floor is going to be completely. See some conversation here? What could we talk about there if I was sitting there with them while they're doing this? So you could have them, you could ask them, okay, how do you know that's 6? Well, I know this is 5. I can see that that's 1 more. So this one has to be 6. So you have to pull it out of them sometimes. But then they'll get to the point, they'll tell you. You don't even have to ask them. Okay, so I'll build a floor of 3. We'll try a 3 because we're building a floor. So you see what you do. You build all the way across. We're doing 6s today. And another 3. Then after they've filled it up across the bottom, they have to roll the number that will complete the floor. that will match up. So if I've got a train of 5 here, what am I going to need to roll here? And you talk to the kids about that, and you ask them, okay, well, they know I'm going to need a 1. And then I've got 2 3s. So that means I'm also going to need 2 more 3s. So they just roll that dice. And let's pretend I rolled a 3. Then I could take that 3 and you put it in a different color. And let's say I rolled, now let's roll 1 for the sake of making it look different. So after you get it all built, then you can do that level 2 where they write the equation. Okay, so what's the equation here? 5 plus 1 equals 6. Or 5 and 1 is 6. What would this one be? This one would be 6, and did you have any white? Did you have to put any white? No, so that's 0. So 6 and 0 is 6. And then, of course, this one would be 3 and 3, which equals 6. So, again, it looks like play, but it's not. They're learning. They are learning, and they're making those combinations. And what's great about this is if you got a kid that's struggling with fluency to 7, they just can't figure out the combinations that make 7, then their number can be 7. You give them a dice that has numbers all the way up through 7. You can leave off the 0 if you need to, leave off a number, or you can give them 2 different dice and they can roll. But it's just great to work on those combinations up through 10 for building this floor. Now the next one is similar to that, but it's the apartment building one. I'm gonna put this back over here for us. Again, you have your directions for the apartment building. So the children are create connecting cube buildings of a particular number, adding to the buildings according to the roll of the number cube. So it's along the same lines of what we just did, except this time it's just a little tweak on it. This time, instead of building across like a floor, we're going to build up. So, and of course you would cut these apart, and one person would have, one partner would have one and one would have another. And then you would roll the dice, same situation, roll the dice. Okay, I got a 5, so I'm going to build a 5. Let's say our number is 6 again. So I put a 5 here, then roll again. I've got a 4. So I can put a 4 here. So you get the idea. And once you've got them all on here, then you have to go back and roll to get the tops up. And you want to put that in a different color again, so you can see the difference, see the combinations. And then, of course, you can ramp that up again and have them write those equations. So it's the same principle. It's just fluency is what we're working on. We're working on fluency. We're working on it conceptually. The kids are seeing it. They're actually moving, touching, building, and it's just making sense to them. It's the main reason why we do this, so they can see it and they can make some sense of it. Working on number sense.